Hello and welcome to the Jewish Heretics podcast. This is the official podcast of the United Jewish People's Order. We are a progressive Canadian Jewish organization that's been around since the 1920s. My name is David Wall, and I am the community's cultural director, and I'll be your host today. For this, the 21st episode of our podcast, I had the great honor of speaking to celebrated author, musician, and educator Gary Barwin. Gary is the author of over 30 books. That's right, I just said over 30 books. He writes in a wide range of genres, including poetry, fiction, visual poetry, as well as young adult and children's literature. He creates music for live performers and computers, text and sound works. His music and writing have been presented in Canada, the US, Japan, and Europe. Barwin's novel Yiddish for Pirates won the 2017 Stephen Leacock Medal for Humor, the Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Fiction, and was shortlisted for the Giller Prize and the Governor-General's Award for English Language Fiction. It was a real pleasure speaking with Gary about a wide range of topics, including his incredibly diverse and prolific practice, his relationship to all things Jewish, and his commitments to empathy and experimentalism as life projects. Here's our conversation. Gary Barwin, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. I'm really glad to be here.
Can you talk about your upbringing? What were your parents like? Did you grow up religious, Zionist, any of that?
I grew up in Northern Ireland, and the background is my grandparents were from Lithuania, emigrated in the 20s, 30s to South Africa, where my parents grew up. And then when they, my dad wanted to go to medical school, they ended up in Northern Ireland, just in time for the start of the Troubles, as it turns out.
Right.
So we stayed till the mid-70s, and then we moved to Canada. And so through all of that, there was really an awareness of being Jewish, being other, because in all of those places, like in South Africa and in Northern Ireland, we definitely were other, like looking in on other political, social, religious, cultural stuff going on. And so there was certainly an awareness of that. I went to Hebrew school in Northern Ireland. I was definitely aware of that kind of Jewishness of identity. I remember being in a elementary school, like my brother and I were the two Jews, and they were telling the Jesus story on little felt boards, and they have, here's Jesus going along, and here's the cross, and here's the Jews who killed him. It was like, right. I remember looking around at finding my brother and 300 kids in the auditorium, and it's like, okay, just be cool, we can pass, it's fine, yeah. But just that sense of being other. We weren't very religious, but we were certainly not filled with kind of Yiddishkeit, but certainly an awareness of Jewishness and of my parents as they got older. They're not really. They're interested in Israel, but not exactly Zionist in their usual way. My mom used to run a thing called a peace camp, which had Palestinians, and they'd invite Palestinian kids and Israeli kids to come to Ottawa and connect. I was very close to my grandfather, who had moved to in Ottawa, had moved near us, and though he was not religious at all. His joke was, he paid $2,000 to be part of the synagogue, so that's like $1,000 an hour of attendance.
Very good.
But he was really interested in culture. He was really interested in Yiddish. He knew Yiddish and would read Yiddish and knew Hebrew and would be reading books. And my grandparents had this massive library, which was a kind of metaphorical presence for me. When they moved, they had a house that they knocked the middle wall down of 2 rooms so that they have room for their library, and that really was impressive to me. But they had a whole wall of Yiddish and Hebrew books, and he would sort of study them as being like a deep connection to Jewish culture, but not to religion per se. So that's kind of how I grew up. I had a bar mitzvah. I went to Hebrew school in Ottawa. I did all those things, and I was very aware of that Jewishness, but not very practicing beyond all the usual high holiday kind of things.
Was there ritual at home? Did you ever do Shabbos, or did your parents care about that stuff?
Not till they were old. Not till they were older. They sort of do some family Shabbos stuff, but generally not really. I mean, not in Ireland when we were there. We had a Christmas tree. I mean, it was Ireland. Um,
Mm.
but but it was definitely presence of Jewishness, but not, yeah, not practicing. They were always involved they were always a member of the synagogue. They ran all sorts of Jewish cultural events in Ottawa. They were part of the, was it Canada Israel Cultural Foundation? They were like the president or whatever you are there, being involved in that kind of thing, like having Jewish musicians come and play, like sometimes play in our house. Sometimes they'll be organizing events like that, but
Right.
not the actual practicing thing. So I had a very cultural Jewish background, but that also meant. But I mean, for me, that also meant like listening to like Jewish music, even like things that were like being interested in that, being interested in the. Loved when I went to synagogue. I loved the chanting, and I loved the Hebrew letters, just as not for what they said. I didn't know what they meant, but I
Mhm.
could just the sense of the aesthetic of the letters and of the suggestiveness of the letters and of the kind of resonance. And so I kind of had this somewhere between postmodernism and Kabbalistic approach to all
Right.
these things.
Right. Right. Yeah. We'll get into that, your relationship to to Hebrew and Yiddish and stuff, because it's just interesting. You really do have a very strong Jewish identity. So I'm just trying to figure out, and it sounds like, for example, your grandparents were a big part of that with their fabulous library and the sort of conduit into Yiddish and stuff. Um,
I used to teach music at a middle school and a private school um,
mm,
in Hamilton, and it wasn't explicitly
mm,
Christian, but everybody was Christian who taught there, and they did these kind of Christian. We sang hymns for the morning chapel and all of that kind of stuff, and I was really struck by all these people who saw me as other, like they were falling all over themselves to make sure that are you kosher? Are there special holidays? Like I was so different and so other, and I'd never had that experience. I mean, even in Ireland, I didn't feel like that. I guess I was a kid then, but and so that really struck me as feeling other.
mm,
And I really thought about what that is. And also the other thing is a lot of the kids who went to the school who were not Christian would look to me. I mean, the Hindu kids, Muslim kids would look to me as sort of the representative other, which is a strange,
yeah.
strange thing experience. And just that sense of thinking more deeply about how Jewishness plays out in the larger culture as other and disentangling, whiteness, privilege, that, and then thinking about my family's history, and like being Jewish in South Africa, being Jewish in Lithuania, being Jewish in Northern Ireland. These are all there's particular relations to the dominant culture, which really fascinated me. And then I started working on my first novel, which really got deep into Jewish things because I think one of the things I wanted to do was sort out my Jewishness and I always had a kind of ambient ambivalence
Yeah.
to Jewishness. I did all the things, but I never really pinned down what it meant to me. Um, so that was a time when I really started thinking about it seriously.
It's interesting you mentioned that you felt othered. But it's especially in the context of that Christians or kind of Christian oriented school where you're
Yeah.
teaching, it almost sounds like a positive otherness, and that, oh, well, are you kosher? Trying to be respectful of your Jewishness. One thing that I encounter a lot these days, and it's I haven't experienced that much direct anti-Semitism in my life.
Hmm.
It's hard for me to relate to, and we'll get into this more, but it's hard for me to relate to the sort of fear among many of my Jewish peers because I haven't. So, did you experience in your life anti-Semitism per se?
No, not at all. I mean, a couple little things like that, like this, but the sense of just being different, I guess, was interesting, but not so different that, like, I'm not a person of color. I'm not, so all of those things, but just that sense of, I had that ambient feeling of difference always. And some of that is personality and just whatever, right? I write poetry and do experimental music, and that's other enough. And I'm non-capitalist and all of that. But just that sense culturally that, this is actually different. We come from a different cultural background. Um, No, not as, not as much. And, my first language is English. So this, all of that. So not a great otherness, but just enough that it was always a presence that hadn't explicitly been marked. And part of my process was to kind of claim otherness, or claim, or to unpack what that meant for me and what my experience of that was. And yeah, and it was really interesting. Like, as this music teacher in the kind of Christian normative school, like all these kids, I had all the queer kids, all the weird artsy kids, all the non-Christian kids. They were sort of my flock. Other teachers had the great basketball player kids and whatever. But I had, and it was a really moving and beautiful experience to be able to be this person who could see them. And part of that was through this otherness. They saw me as other, for all the other reasons, but also for the Jewishness. So yes, it was, there's that thing though, that it wasn't anti-Semitism, but the way that they fumbled all over me was like, I don't know some kind of microaggression or something. Just, it was really uncomfortable because I was marked by something that I wasn't feeling. In the various places my family were, at least not my grandparents, but the other places, there were bigger fish to fry. I mean, there was active apartheid, and there was the troubles in Northern Ireland. So Jews were like an afterthought. So that wasn't foundational to our sense of self, and it was a lot about a sense of justice and kind of using our privilege to help in some way, and to also in some way to be like. And my parents, as I said, did lots of cultural things, so that was part of what. So promoting Jewish, like young Jewish musicians coming over to our house to play, or to that kind, or Israeli science or whatever, that kind of stuff. That was the positive, not the negative.
It's interesting, and I'm hearing also how you developed your politics, because I ask people on this podcast how they turned into lefties, and I can
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
hear it in your upbringing that you talking about those bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, and like, my mom used to be part of the Alliance Party, doing stuff in Northern Ireland, trying to create an alliance between Catholics and Protestants. And my
Right.
dad was involved in. He was a doctor and involved in reproductive rights. He did lots and lots of campaigning for the right for abortion, and for lots of, and for providing surgery for trans people, and adoption.
Wow. So you
Uh,
come from good stock, as they say. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that was always, there's a kind of um, our job was to be morally involved in the
Mm.
and in a positive way, not in a negative way. Though I should say, I'll tell you a story, because
Mm.
I feel like the way to tell things is through little stories. My I've been with my wife since I was 18,
Mm.
and I remember being, I don't know, I was 25 or something. And no, actually, it must have been older, because my kids were born. And so my in-laws are, my wife's Jewish, my in-laws are Jewish. They grew up quite insularly in Hamilton, in an exclusively Jewish world. And I remember when their other daughter was going out with somebody who was not Jewish. So my mother-in-law was trying to express how challenging that was, and how problem. And she says, imagine if one of your kids came home from school and they were writing rhyming poetry. Can you imagine? Oh, I feel your pain. Oh, yes.
She's trying to she's trying to make you rich, because it's the most horrible imagining she could come up with.
Right. Yeah. It's like, oh God. Yes.
It's amazing.
Quick. We better break her up with, and get her Jaime Schwartz to go out with. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
I must say, just in their defense, we just had, my father-in-law's been in hospital for the last few months. And so we just had Rosh Hashanah. And so we brought food to the hospital, and we snuck him down to the cafeteria, and we had, we brought the full, like fancy grandmother's tablecloth, and the candlesticks, and brisket, and he couldn't eat any of it because he's had a digestive issue.
Mm.
But like, he was there looking like, my in-laws were cavelling with their two queer granddaughters. One granddaughter is with her partner is a black Nigerian Muslim girl, and they were just so, and they had a little granddaughter who's my brother-in-law married a Cuban woman. So this, like, all these people of color, not from, the queer people, and they were just like, just quelling, because this is their family. And to me, even though they were very, very insular, they like through that family, that fundamental family value of Jewishness about families, whatever they look like. I was they that really moved them in
Yeah.
terms of where they because they grew up. Part of my Yiddishkeit interest comes from my father-in-law, who does all the jokes. He grew up speaking Yiddish in Toronto, just very much in that world. So that's also, I mean, again, since I was 18, so that's sort of also part of my Jewish consciousness
Mm.
is his culture.
Well, it sounds beautiful that there was that inclusivity.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that, yeah, I mean, and so um, I would say that's also been another part, which is more than the specifics. It's about what is it? There's halacha and there's meta halacha. They talk about with like it's like okay, but this sure they're rules, but what's the real core point of what we want to do? And that's embracing your family, like loving people and connecting with people and welcoming people to your table.
I would say, would that more people would get into that meta halacha,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
because I want to switch gears a little bit, and talk about how annoying you are. Um,
Excellent.
here's a two-part question. You're annoying because you're really, really good at multiple things.
I
Uh,
thought you'd be talking to my children.
no, you play different instruments,
Yes.
including saxophone. You do it beautifully. You're a published poet, novelist. Like I read, it's one of these things you skip on Wikipedia. It says you've written 30 books. I'm like, 30 books? Is that a typo? Novelist, teacher, you're an experimental multimedia artist, performer, kind of an all-around artistic polyglot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not to be I don't want this is could come off as trite, but what came first? Did you enter the world of art through music? Was that the place? Can you talk about when you discovered you wanted to be a musician? And then the other side of the question is, um, what took you into these experimental realms? I'm thinking about compositions you do for live computer performance, your visual sound poetry and stuff. So it's,
Yeah.
all
Um,
that stuff.
no, it's really interesting when one tries to figure out like what were the moments. In a way, I think about I since I was a little kid, I did music. I started on recorder, and then I played cello, and then in middle school, I started saxophone. Um, and but I was always playing music, but I was also like always making art and writing. Um, yeah, and writing, and I just never stopped. Like in the way that I guess I had the immense either maladaptation to society and the immense privilege from my parents who just let me. Just like I just kept doing those things that like as kids do who make stuff and just are, make art, do art, play music, I just kept doing it. And so the idea of there being like either real feeling really difference between one thing one art form and the other, they feel like they just flow together for me. And it's just about making things and exploring materials. Um, so so that just felt really natural where to continue on. I mean, music was really the focus of for me through high school, but I wrote all the time as well. I went to a fine arts high school and for grade 11 and 12, a boarding school where my roommate used to he could quote he would recite T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland from memory, the whole
Oh my
thing,
goodness.
in grade 11, right? That kind of stuff.
Oh boy.
And it just the idea of there are, and we had these incredible writers come to visit the school, like major writers like Robert Bly or Mark Strand or
Mm.
Etheridge Knight, and so just the idea of that, you could actually be a writer, and so that for me, I could that kind of ramped up my writing, which I was always doing as in connection with a lot of reading and a lot of listening to music. To me, those were portals to the world. I would, in my little suburban bedroom in Ottawa, I'd go to Sam the Record Man in the mall and buy all the, go to the jazz and classical section. I'd spend the babysitting money I made and buy records and discover, like, it felt like I was making the world bigger by, like a way into the world. And the same thing with writing.
Mm.
I'd be reading all these books, and it just seemed that's how you learn the world. And from my little base camp in my I had that that green shag carpet that looks like a lawn. I had that in which in my bedroom. I just remember sitting on that green shag rug like it was a lawn, and listening to, you know, John Coltrane, and then Anthony Braxton, and then, John Cage. So I'm not sure about the experimental stuff. I mean, to me, it was just always like, what are the, like, how far can you go, or what, like, what's possible? I guess that was the thing.
Mm.
Um, so like I I started saxophone, and I wanted to when in grade seven, and then I got a book about jazz, and I wanted to, like, okay, where are all the places saxophone happens? And so I'd go from one album to the other, learning about musicians. But then yeah, I guess I just really wanted to see what was possible. And it's like, if you were in a country, what is the highest up in the country? What is the edge? What is the, most remote place? It just that I had that curiosity just to want to know that. It didn't seem um, it just seemed a sense of adventure, I guess. And so I've always felt that. And if I've got language, what can I do with the language?
Mm.
How can you push it? Just because that's, I guess, like a sense of curiosity, and I guess a sense of, I mean, it does sound a little bit um, trite also, but like it sends like a sense of wonder about what's possible, right? Like it's um, and how that works, and then how that makes, what that does to the listener, in terms of like how you're able to connect. If you're making some avant-garde thing, how that connects in your brain. Like there's two little things on either side of your brain that somehow are connected. That it arcs in between them, and that's exhilarating to me, rather than, oh yeah, this is down the well-trodden path that's just that does not opening up any new pathways in my brain.
Wow. I'm going to psychologize a little bit.
Excellent.
Well, no, that's really fascinating. So you're way into Yiddish,
Hmm.
the Yiddish language. The Yiddish language is, this relates, by the way. I'm not
Hmm.
just going off on a tangent. The Yiddish language is singular in so many ways. One of which is the fact that I was remarking recently, I can't think of a nation state that has ever been run in Yiddish. Yiddish
Right.
Yiddish has never been tied to a place. It's almost by definition a diasporic language. It wanders.
Hmm.
And you strike me as kind of artistically diasporic. You wander around genres and media, and your biography has wandering in it. You were born in Ireland.
Yeah.
So you're kind of a genre
Oh,
fence jumper.
that's yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Um,
that's interesting.
um,
Uh,
do you? But here's my question, because actually I can't remember what essay I was reading by yours. Where it's not like you have disdain for Bach chorales, which are very rule based, but you
no,
say,
I absolutely, I
but
adore.
it's different. And so my
Yeah.
question is, do you think there's advantages to being connected to genre, form, being rooted within boundaries that you don't, that doesn't seem to be your modality that often. Do you think that you're missing out on something by being so diasporic?
Um, No, not at all. Because I love my mother. No, no, because I don't. I listen to lots of wow. I listen to lots of very mainstream things, and find it deeply moving. And I really can't imagine the world without listening to
But
Bach
that's
or
not necessarily part of your practice, is what I'm saying.
no, but not directly.
Mm.
I've written some novels that have like, it was kind of a revelation to me. I was 50. I wrote a novel, and it's like, oh, character, plot, setting. Those are really powerful things you can do in a novel.
Who
I
would
never
who would have
occurred to me to do.
thought? Who would have
Yeah,
thought? Yeah.
and though of course I adored all of those things in the books that are, that I loved. Even like as a teenager, I used to read, I don't know, The Count of Monte Cristo and Treasure
Mm.
Island. Like those page turning, plot driven, character driven things I love those adventure books, absolutely. So it's like, okay, but I don't need to replicate that structure. Now I can play with that because that's established, and we have those books. So now how can I use elements of that, or understand that kind of propulsion, or elements of that to play with, to explore, to push to its limits, so to me, um I'm not ignoring those things. I'm just thinking, what else is possible.
Right.
So like I did a piece the last couple of days where I was really interested in. Charles Ives has a piece called The Unanswered Question,
Hmm.
which I've always really loved. So I thought, okay, what happens if I slow it down? It begins very slowly. So what happens if I slow it down 10 times, and then sort of work with that material? And so I'm taking something about it that I really loved, um, but just now exploring the edges of it. So I
Mm.
feel like that's the kind of thing that, because what happens when it's like, okay, I got this thing, I'm gonna take it on the road. What can it do? Like, what can, the kind of, what can sustained strings do? What can harmony do? What can, what are these elements? What happens when you see you take that, you explore them to their limits. And to me also, then, not only materially, what does that do to the person listening, like in terms of us as, like, what does it evoke in the person in terms of feelings, or what new feelings, or what reconnections with feelings. Sometimes I think part of it is, in order to um, make you come to yourself and see things anew, you need to do a sort of a sneak attack. You have to go around the back of the brain, because otherwise, the impulse is just to feel the same things
Yes.
with the same stimuli. And so to be able to reinvent the stimuli so that it opens you back up, so you back up to either the feelings that you had, that just got turned into routine, or else just connections that you didn't have before. um, or even like, what is it that I can feel when I see these I'm experiencing these sounds, or reading these words. Like, what is that feel? Oh, okay, that teaches me something about what's going on inside me too.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
not only about the material; it's also about the human experience of the material for me.
Right. You engage in a lot of play.
Hmm.
Um, I found a poem of yours that I really love, that was published in Granta, this amazing magazine,
Oh yeah.
called Thinking Birds. And it seems to be, it sort of starts in a place of maybe how human beings fit into nature. You evoke trees and rivers, and there's a kind of universalism that sounds very poetic. I love this. There's an amazing line that goes, "It's philosophy coming from everyone at once, like a ball gown worn by the sky." Such a
Hmm.
beautiful line. But then you do the Gary Barwin thing, which is you insert something about onion rings
Oh yes.
and how you're craving onion rings. And it feels like, in this glory, in a good way, it feels a kind of almost like a mix of sacred and profane. And I'm not surprised to see that you studied with B.P. Nichol,
Yeah.
the great Canadian poet, musician, professor, who was also simultaneously serious and playful,
Yes.
or seriously playful.
Hmm.
Can you talk about this playful, reverent irreverence, I call it, and where it comes from and what it means to you?
Yeah. I might, I mean, latterly I might connect that to like a Jewish tradition. I always think, I have written, in the last 15 years, I've written a lot of Jewish material, in my novels particularly, and I've really thought about the place of humor in, like, in my experience, which in my culture. Like, if you a rabbi will often start with a joke
Hmm.
as a way of unpacking, and to destabilizing, and again to making things new. So that is one thing. But so that you kind of have to have your wits about you always, like, to be able to see different sides, to take you out of the frame. So I mean, I love that language or art can take you to a, like a you can enter into it, and it can feel, very solemn, and you completely buy what it's telling you, and you can be seduced by these beautiful words, whether as politicians or religious leaders or a person. um, and that's an amazing experience. But also, I also feel like you all need to know that that's happening, and humor is one thing that takes you out of the frame, and so that you see the other side of things. You're constantly expanding your view. So that, I mean, that's definitely one thing about irreverence.
Hmm.
um, and things are, to me, they're kind of, it doesn't take much to see things as delightfully absurd, I mean, and not in a meaningless way. It's amazing that is the case, right? Like, it's funny. Like, you can look at anything, and changing the frame a bit, it seems like, what a strange thing to be doing. I'm
Hmm.
talking to you, sitting down, looking at this screen that says Zoom, but I'm not seeing you. I'm talking, and we're talking. It just seems like an odd, weird thing, right? Like, I don't know
Hmm.
if our voices are bouncing off a satellite or not, and it just, I don't know, it just feels, so many things can seem like absurd, or incongruous, or delightfully odd, I think. I mean, the fact of a life is odd and delightful, and difficult, and all those things. And so, to me, that's implicitly, um um yeah, well, absurd, I guess, with all of the with all of the humor and surprise of that. Um, so that's one thing, and I also think that making those moves or just thinking about those kind of that kind of irreverence. The other thing I think that surprise or humor does is it draws the audience, the reader, into the poem. So you're sharing it with them. I feel it builds like a little mini community, just like we were telling jokes or referring to funny stories. That's part of the kind of communicative building of community, like building of like understanding, drawing other people in. Like the idea that I could say something funny presupposes there's somebody funny to say it to. It just feels like, or the person listening to it can appreciate that. So I feel there is that sense of not being alone, a feeling of a fellow feeling that comes from that kind of irreverence, as well as tipping the frame, I think.
Hmm.
Because I'm always, I mean, that feels like I mean, I feel that's in the Jewish tradition too. That's like a postmodern thing, which is to always be aware of the means of the communication happening, of the languageness of it, the communication actness of it.
No, it's interesting. It makes me think of something that, first of all, I'm glad to hear that your father-in-law's still with us. You put a on your Substack, which I love reading and experiencing because it's not just reading. There's music and visual
Hmm.
art and visual. Um, in August, I think you posted that I think it's him, he was in ICU, very ill, and he turned to a nurse and said this incredible joke. He said, "If I die, I'm never going to speak to you again."
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just thought was just unbelievably so funny and so dark.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah,
Uh,
it was
a- a- a-
amazing.
and it really reflects in so much of your work, you're dealing with the limits of pathos and humor.
And
And
there's another thing that he was telling me. It was so yeah, he's actually supposedly going home today finally,
oh, amazing.
which is really great. Um, but it was last week. He was feeling really bad, and he just still had lots of symptoms, and and he was like joking and telling stories and being the kind of raconteur and jokester that he is to the nurses. And then he turned to my wife and I and goes like, like I feel like awful, but I still can't help telling jokes, right? Like still can't
Hmm.
help entertaining. And I sort of love that, yeah, like that kind of pathos, but that he wants that. It's not only that it's performative, but it's this deep need for connection and for, and to locate himself in the world, I think, and taking agency through that,
Yes.
which I so relate to. Um, you know, eh, that he does that, and for me, it really comes out of, since we're talking Jewish, it really does come out of a Jewish tradition to me. I mean, there's many instances of it in other cultures, but I see that the Jewish version of that.
And is it almost a cliche of laughing through our tears kind of thing? Is it kind of like it sounds like you're saying it's almost like a power. If you're joking about something, you have power over the situation, or you're
Yeah,
able
no,
to.
no, exactly. I mean, I think I've read people in the Holocaust who have tell these jokes, and it's somehow you have agency. You presuppose. I mean, it's pain. It's pain, but it's your pain. So, you
Yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, um, so there's something about that it's not just laughing through the tears, it's actually like owning the tears, it's having agency for the tears, I
yeah.
think, as well as that communication bit. It presupposes, like you're in a concentration camp and you're thinking of a joke or something, or that it is you're thinking of. I mean, obviously that's sort of implicitly optimistic, but it's also you're presupposing that you can tell that joke to somebody, right?
Oh,
You want to know my favorite Holocaust joke? Here, I'll tell.
hmm, hmm.
Which so, guy dies, goes to heaven, and uh, God, God's up in heaven. And a guy says, "Oh, great! God, you're amazing. You know everything. So you're definitely gonna you're definitely gonna get this joke. So I've got this great Holocaust joke that I want to tell you. God, you're gonna this is gonna be amazing." So the guy tells the joke, and God goes, "I don't get it." And he goes, "Yeah, guess you had to be there."
No, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
So anyway, so
Uh,
it's an old joke, but it's really great. And I just love the idea of like that's claiming your loneliness, your experience, your pain. Um,
hmm.
and I guess I really feel that. And then that, yeah, and building community through storytelling. And which is what I see my father-in-law doing. Um,
Hmm.
you know,
You mentioned briefly the word optimism. I
yeah,
don't know if you remember that you mentioned that word.
yeah.
Um, So there's an essay that I really, really, I mean, I vibe with so much of what you do, and I love Yiddish for Pirates. It's just this magnificent book. But there's an essay you wrote called "John Coltrane Was My Bar Mitzvah Teacher"
Yeah.
from your collection of essays, Imagining. And in this incredible essay, you evoke the much evoked Walter Benjamin image of the angel of history flying backward into
Yes.
the future, um, propelled by catastrophe rather than facing forward into a kind of progressing future, like actually just looking back at this accumulated
Yeah.
awfulness. Um, but one thing, so you acknowledge that, and it's from the Paul Klee painting. You acknowledge this, but you add music and literature and expressive arts onto the heap, kind of.
Yes.
So as maybe a spiritual possibility or a conduit for empathy, and also a way for us to be in the moment when we experience art, as opposed to looking backwards or forwards.
Hmm.
Um, and then you go on to compare Coltrane's melodies to, or his modalities to, chorus of old men dovening. You make
Yes.
all these incredible comparisons. So, can you discuss, first of all, what kind of things link these different traditions? How is Coltrane like old men dovening?
Yes.
And then just answer, like, can engaging in and making and experiencing art turn you into an optimist?
Oh, I love that question. That's so great. I mean, to me, immediately, I think even the fact that we could even ask that question makes me feel optimistic and full of energy. Like to me,
Mm.
that's art. Um, but so to go back to the old man davening. I mean, I guess I was started playing saxophone in grade 7, and I was doing my bar mitzvah, or it was just around that time, and I really and I would listen to the cantillation of the cantor, and again it was a thing of feeling with otherness. So this is the kind of Coltrane I'm talking about, is his a lot of his music that was interested in modality. He was listening to non-Western music, Indian music, different modes, and the kind of winding melodies that were very highly decorated. Really felt a lot like the kind, and sounded to me quite a bit like the sort of solo cantillation, and the kind of way that the time kind of changed, and the kind of also emotional intensity. I think a kind of religious intensity to these things. Um, uh, that itself felt very much like um, the Jewish cantors singing. So I really made that connection, and I was like, while I thought about him claiming that voice, I was thinking about, as I was learning how to sing my bar mitzvah piece. Um, so that really connected, and the kind of, I guess, the kind of sacredness in abstraction. It wasn't there wasn't an explicit theology behind it. It was just the music, and that, to me, that was a way in of, when I was learning chanting, I wasn't really thinking about the words, about what I was chanting about, King Uziyahu, or whatever my parsha was about.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
I was just thinking about I mean, it felt very moving to be able to chant these words and to come out of my sort of solo voice. And then in terms of, I love that kind of, I feel like it's a non enlightenment texture, a bunch of men davening. It's not everybody. You were talking about Bach chorales, where everybody in lockstep sings the regular rhythm. Everybody, and they each move note to note together, and it's got vertical coherence. The idea of old men davening, where they mumble in and out. There's some bit you can understand them, you cannot understand, and this whole weaving texture felt a lot to me. First of all, an alternate to the dominant Western paradigm and philosophical or even logical paradigm, but also I saw that in a lot of the later sort of free jazz kinds of things and experimental music, where there's weaving in and out of things, and it's a group texture that it's all based around maybe a central idea, but the way it's woven in, individuals are making these choices, that then you can hear the whole texture together. That felt, that texture of a way of being in the world, part of this whole fabric where everybody is entangling together in this kind of sort of loose, tight sort of community. It felt really resonant with me and made sense to me in terms of how one might be in the world. And as an alternate to, yeah, like the kind of strict patriarchal logic, Enlightenment logic that seemed to define out a lot of the mystery and wonder and strangeness of the world.
Mm. Hmm.
Uh, yeah. So, and there was another part of the question I started answering, I forget, but
Oh,
yeah.
about so because just related to that. I mean, at the risk of sounding pretentious, relating to the Walter Benjamin
Yeah,
idea,
yeah, yeah.
and that's because you introduced into that catastrophic heap that's
Yeah.
propelling the engine. You introduce art in there as a
Yes.
kind of not a prescriptive or corrective, but as a kind of, I don't know, uh, uh, alternative ingredient.
Yeah,
And so,
because yeah. Because I mean, so like as you said, like the angel of history is being like it's being pushed back into the future with the heap of catastrophe piling up in front of him. And so absolutely there's the great, tragedies and sorrows of the world, but I also see, yeah, I definitely am seeing all of the other things. So not only the tragedies and sorrows of the world that have been then addressed through art, and we've mediated through, and we have that experience that we both know about them from that, but also we have a way of interacting or thinking about them, listening to the music and reading the work and seeing the art. That's part of the we have that, and to me that's the whole all of those human voices as well. It's not just art itself, so that we don't know what I mean. That's the thing, is he's backwards into the future because we don't know what's going to happen, but we have that consolation, we have that company of all of those voices that have come from what's been before.
mm,
And so while we can't know what's happening, we can be engaging with all of this heap of this heap of the world, right? And all the things that are in it, and not to forget that, like not to be to me not to be afraid of what's happening, because we have the the courage and consolation of all of that's come before, and it's all that's speaking to the our situation, I guess.
hmm. Yeah. Um, it's interesting because there are some differences in the art that you're referencing. There's, and this is obvious, but you're talking, the cantor is a solo singer
Yep.
leading prayer, but very much, and especially the tradition that I love, and I studied to be a cantor,
Oh,
and
that's
the
right. Yes.
tradition in the sort of virtuosic cantorial singing.
Hmm.
It's very star oriented.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about this chaotic fabric of all these old men davening together,
Yes.
even though it's just men. But
Yeah.
those are two different kinds of art making, and I'm stretching things to say that it's not necessarily art making. It's sacred or whatever it is. But for all intents and purposes, it's artistic expression.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a collectivity about those men davening. Um, and so, do you think that in some ways that has what's the word I'm looking for? A kind of reparative aspect, that collective art making per se, it creates community and cohesion and points to the possibility of communal engagement. Do you know what
Yeah, no, I definitely think that. I mean, it is it is. I mean, it may not look like like the sacred rituals you might have imagined in the temple. These sort of unshaven guys drinking the shivas in the morning, chanting, but I mean, it definitely has that ritual, that coming together to create this polyphonic texture of,
Yes,
like, musically and socially, these and I think there's also an awareness that other people are doing this across the world, and other people
yes.
have done this in the past. So it changes your relationship to time and space, which is
Mm.
what one of the things that rituals do. But I do think, yes, there's the solo cantor sort of showing off, but there's also or being virtuoso for the sake of expression, for to the glory of God. But there's still those moments, like in a whole where it alternates, and to me the cantors that I've heard that I'm most moved by are not the operatic virtuosos, but there's a humility even in their um, like the all those like decorations that they sing. They're not. It's not about virtuosity. It's somehow about as I feel it's like in a lot of Bach, for instance. It's about um, expressing the marvelousness and the wonder of the world and the
Hmm.
depth of feeling. And
Hmm.
I've heard cantors that are marvelous, but they're not. It's they don't feel like they're being virtuoso. They feel like they're really connected. They've got their role, like they lead because and also in a service it goes back and forth
That's
between
right. Call
groups
and
of
response.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but even it's like okay now you're gonna you group of old men in the traditional thing are gonna mumble together and then I'm gonna sing a song and we're gonna sing it all together and then I'm gonna do
Hmm.
something solo and then you're gonna like all of the different textures.
Hmm.
So musically that feels very satisfying and I guess in terms and socially or in terms of like the different modalities that how people interact I find that um, really great. And yeah, I mean, one of the things I would say about my Jewishness is that it's important to me that I guess I there's not a pope in famously there's not a pope in Jewish in the Jewish religion, which means that it's decentered. You can decide what Jewishness is for you and how you feel. So I feel like I'm picking and choosing. Yes, I'm interpreting aspects of the
Yes.
of the practice and belief in the way that I feel that connects to me. And I
Hmm.
like that because I mean, it's a fabric of possibilities rather than a set of like catechisms. It's or a set of like rules of how to, despite various people have different specific ideas, but I feel like the tradition at large, I can define it. Charles Bernstein, the American poet, talks about antinomial Judaism, basically like you are just Jewish because you're Jewish. And he also says I'm never more Jewish than when I question my Jewishness. So I love
Right.
the kind of paradoxical inquiry and reinvention all the time of the tradition. Which so the group of old men, I'm very aware of sort of you know. Gender limitations and misogyny and the number of things in the tradition, but I can extract the things I want from that and never, and we're also not talking about what they're singing. For me, I'm able to abstract that and get the things that I are meaningful to me out of it. And I
So
can
yeah.
argue how that I can substantiate that, or I can justify that based on the tradition, or like there's various ways of thinking about um, how one is the tradition or the Torah is infinitely interpretable because it's a finite expression of an infinite God. So I can, even in my sort of secular way, I can find sacred holiness in all of these traditions, like in my own way, and not I don't have to follow a doctrine per se.
This is a perfect segue. I've never heard such a perfect segue into my perhaps last question. Um, so this podcast has existed pretty much simultaneously with the genocide in Gaza.
Yes.
Like it started 2 years ago.
Mm.
And when I talk to guests with strong, even related to what you just said, celebratory Jewish identities,
Hmm.
who also share my profound revulsion for the actions of Israel,
Hmm.
Zionism, the use of our Jewishness as a tool for the erasure of Palestinians.
Yes.
Um, I try I try to look for people who model a continued interest in Jewishness as something worth preserving.
Yes.
So let me explain what I mean. I'm being rhetorical here. I almost don't believe what I'm about to say, but part of me does, and I just want you to help me work through it.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
uh, why is it worthwhile or important for us as Jews to keep engaging in our rituals and our traditions, and in a sense, our separateness, our specialness, when so much of it has been tarnished? So, um, by way of analogy, Omar al-Akkad's book from last year called One Day Everyone Will Have Been Against This
Hmm.
asks the question, he asks what's salvageable in Western so-called enlightened traditions in the face of Gaza, like what's left for us. It's
Yes.
been so tarnished. And so I'm being overdramatic perhaps, but from one Jewish cultural worker to another, what is salvageable for you? And you've partially answered this, but what is salvageable to you about Jewishness?
Um, Well, one thing I immediately think about, you talked about our specialists. So one thing I think that's really important is that um, the kind of binaries about like you're white or you're not white, these kinds of, you're Western or you're not Western. I think, first of all, for everybody to take apart these simplistic binaries. I mean, white supremacy exists, and I would say a certain kind of Jewishness is included in that. Like I would say Israeli ethno-nationalism, to take apart the kind of to continue to take apart the monolith that is white culture, that is Western culture, because it exists as something to shun or to in opposition to um, not Western culture. So they say Israel is the only democracy in the region. So then that's like they're creating, it creates others, and then the others can be our lesser. And so I think that not to so that is not to say that there should be some sort of exceptionalism, like Jews are specially chosen and so they can do anything, but as part of not understanding that, I guess, each different group has its own particularity, and so to make that part of the connection, so that it's not just us and them. There's similarly with like within Judaism, to take apart Judaism as a monolith. There's many kinds of Jewishness historically all over the world, and many different kinds of practices, and nothing to do with Zionism. And so that itself is a powerful thing, because it's the sort of idea of essentializing the only Jewishness is this Zionist, ethno state, based on this ethno state.
Hmm.
A bunch of Maccabees with six packs who are going to, beat back the darkness around them, is not, so I think taking that apart, that's one thing, that considering Jewishness and the multiplicity of Jewishness and the variousness of Jewishness. But I also see, to me, I guess I see it as um, I mean, as a tradition of deep thought and compassion and philosophy. I mean, it's um, a, a epistemic frame of that, which is based in inquiry and paradox
Hmm.
and a sense of the sacred, a sense of possibility, a sense of, all of these things, which I feel, and great beauty and great um, yeah, I think like compassion, once you get outside of the fear and the um uh, kind of yeah, the kind of fear and terror and trauma, and um and so there's also the possibility of the kind of empathy, like it's like if it's never again. So like we understand suffering. We've been othered, we've been persecuted. So how can we then take that insight and then share that with the world? In other words,
Hmm.
help other people. So I mean, I'm appalled and shocked by, of course, by what Israel's done to Gaza, but and supposedly in the name of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, and that itself is so appalling to me, because that's exactly, to me, what is the lesson of the Holocaust? The lesson isn't you build a fortress. The lesson is we because Jews have done all right. I mean, it was a really bad thing, but like somehow, and so to take the lesson is to then to help other people, to be able to in solidarity with other persecuted people, to all of the things that Jews have been able to achieve, and also perhaps their ability to access knowledge and learning and even kind of Western privilege, to take that and help the world. That is a
Well,
tikkun olam
that's
kind of I mean, fundamentally. And to me, anything of that is not understanding what being Jewish
well,
is.
exactly. You and I grew up. Sorry to interrupt.
No, absolutely.
You and I grew up in similar milieu. In that, I grew up thinking that to be Jewish was almost an equal sign. To be Jewish is
Mm.
to be social justice oriented, to be a lefty.
Yeah.
That's what
Yes.
I thought Jewishness was.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And now I'm just in this crazy upside down world where that's just not,
I mean,
in terms of mainstream, in terms of majority, I just don't get that sense anymore. And
I
I
mean,
just find it so puzzling and so
yeah. I
sad.
mean, I think about, when I think about some like Christian movements, when they say like this isn't what Jesus wanted. Like Christianity is Jesus. Like, okay, I'd sign up for what Jesus wanted, right? But like, which is the same thing as what we're talking about,
Yeah.
which is different than kind of the churches and all of the, church leaders flying about in jets or whatever, right? Like that's like, the kind of deep empathy, the anti-capitalist, all basically fundamental leftist values that is deeply in Christianity, which have been completely forgone. It's happening with Judaism too. I think the seduction of capitalism, of that kind of power, and a kind of libertarian capitalist thing that's happened in a lot of places in the world, everything gone right, which I think is a response to, I mean, largely it's about how the power of capital has distorted everything, and neoliberalism, but it's also, but what that one of the ways that the one of the ways that operates, like there's a receptor in the brain that fits into, and that receptor is about fear and insecurity in the world, economically and in terms of environmentally, as well as whatever past traumas like persecution. And so I feel that like that's a way that people from all across the world want to feel empowered by this other thing, which is exactly not. It's only going to make things worse, but that it fits into that brain receptor. It's that powerful chemical that's a and I feel that part of my job, I guess, I feel as a such as as a Jewish creator, or when I'm addressing these things, is to kind of pull that back and say, wait a second, that's actually like it's a false thing. That's not what my Judaism is about, and that's not what Judaism is about. That's something else, and let's be really clear. And to celebrate the culture, all those things in the culture that are not that we've spoken to, that have been spoken about, for millennia, that are not about that, and that open up I don't know, I'd say more mysterious, more compassionate, more left, more inclusive world that we can always go back to, like biblical things where we see sort of you know ethno-militaristic power happening in with Jews,
Yeah,
but that's not this culture. That hasn't been the cultural tradition. We sort of we don't really think about that. Hasn't been what's happened since then. Those are Bible stories. That's true, but that's not what we have. The values. That's not what the rabbis have been talking about, and it's not what the secular Jews have been talking about. Until neoliberalism and I would say that the Europeans beautifully managed to pass off the Jewish problem, and redirect it into this sort of ethno-nationalistic handoff. So we've set us back into the 19th century. I feel like we've been the fall guys, and we have to resist that and say, no, we're not buying that just because it feels so kind of deliciously empowering. It's wrong.
Thank you so much, Gary. This has been a really interesting, enlightening conversation. Thank you.
No, thanks very much. Yeah, absolutely. For me too.
Well, we've come to the end of our show. We'd like to thank you for listening, and we'd like to thank everyone who made our podcast possible, including United Jewish People's Order Executive Director Serena Sarin and our guest, Gary Barwin. This podcast was recorded at Walt Whitman Studios in Toronto. The theme music was composed by Serena Sarin with help from me. My name's David Wall. Until next time, seid gesund.